After 2 weeks off with little boxing action, we are back on the ESBR YouTube channel with the boxing week ahead. Once again, joined by ESBR's own Paul Kelly. Paul, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Sam. Yourself?
Yeah, very good, thanks. So this week is probably easily the biggest fight we've covered on this show. It is the heavyweight world title fight between Anthony Joshua and Oleksandr Usyk, and we'll just get straight into it. Paul, is this the biggest fight of the year?
Yeah, I don't think you can argue that it is. I obviously you got Fury Wilder, three in a couple of weeks. If that goes ahead, that's obviously another huge fight.
Mm.
We were robbed of Pacquiao Spence, which would have been a really big fight. Maybe still not as big as this one because obviously being a heavyweight fight that instantly makes a fight just that much bigger. So I think you have to say it is probably the biggest fight of the year. Definitely the biggest fight of the year so far. Unless some big massive Canelo fight or something gets made before the end of the year, I think it will be the biggest fight of 2021 for sure.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I think probably the most excited I've been for a fight in 2021. I think Pacquiao Spence would have been up there on that level, but I think with it being a British fighter in Anthony Joshua, and I'm a big Oleksandr Usyk fan as well. I think that just makes it like and it is an interesting fight as well. And it's one of those fights where Joshua, I know he had to kind of take it because it's a mandatory, but there's so many it's very intriguing this fight, and there are quite a lot of questions, and it isn't an easy fight. It isn't one of the when we look back at the Pulev mandatories or the Povetkin mandatories, it's not where everyone kind of expected Joshua to win with ease. This fight, there are a lot more challenges, and I think it will be a bigger challenge for Anthony Joshua. Do you think this is Joshua's hardest fight of his career?
We've talked about this. I was talking about this with two Elliots on one of the other videos, and I said I think it's possibly second toughest opponent that he'll have faced. My argument was Klitschko, and although people were saying about him being 40 or whatever, I think that Klitschko that Joshua fought is one of the best Klitschkos you've seen in years, even the one compared to the one that Fury beat. I think the Klitschko at that night at Wembley was far better than the Klitschko that Fury fought. So I still think Klitschko as a name as well, and just kind of how long he ruled the heavyweight division for. I think he's still the biggest name on his record. So to me, this will be the second biggest. I know at the time, Dylan White, it was only for a British title or something. So obviously looking back on that now, like with what both fighters have gone on to achieve, that's a big name on his record. The Povetkin one's another good one as well because nobody had ever stopped him, and they'd only been beaten once as well. Until Joshua stopped him in the seventh round or whatever it was. So that was quite an impressive win. But I'd say this is probably his second. If he was to get the win, I'd put it down as his second best. It also depends on the manner of victory, I think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If it's if you watch the fight and he really struggles but somehow gets the win, well then it might be his toughest fight. You never know. He could if he blows Usyk away within 6 rounds, we could be like, but are you sure he was just a pumped up cruiserweight anyway? Blah blah blah. So it's just time will tell. But for me, on paper, probably Usyk is the second toughest Joshua opponent.
For me, I think this is I'm with you on the Klitschko, but for a slightly different reason. But I actually think this is his third toughest fight. But I'm looking at it more from a mental aspect. I think there was a lot of pressure on that first Klitschko fight, as he is the biggest name in UK boxing, this big up and coming star. And there was a pressure on him that night. That was kind of like the old Adam Smith lift off for AJ. That was that night. That was the moment he suddenly became like a world superstar, not just a big name in Britain. And then for me, the other one, because again of the pressure on that fight, was the second Andy Ruiz fight. I don't think Andy Ruiz is anywhere near the level of boxer that Oleksandr Usyk is, but I think again the pressure on AJ that night in Saudi Arabia was a lot bigger than Saturday against Oleksandr Usyk. Obviously, there are different pressures on Saturday and the fights that may or may not come, but on that night in Saudi Arabia, I think that was his career-defining night. I think if he loses that fight, his career's, for all intents and purposes, at this level is kind of done, because
Mhm.
we've seen how often have the belts even changed hands in the last 2 years. They haven't even been contested, really. So to get onto that level again would have been near impossible, if not really hard. So for me, this is kind of the third, maybe not in terms of talent, but the third biggest night of his career so far.
Yeah,
In terms of the challenger, Oleksandr Usyk, obviously we've seen limited performances at heavyweight. Obviously, the undisputed cruiserweight champion of the world, an incredibly talented amateur, an incredibly talented boxer. How much weight do you put into his fights against Chaz Witherspoon and also Derek Chisora?
I think you've got to put a wee bit of weight into it. I don't think you can just go off the cruiserweight king title, really, because that was a while ago now. He's been a heavyweight for what, 2 years probably, and
Yeah.
probably around then. Could be wrong, but he's had those 2 fights, and let's be honest, if you're saying that you're really impressed by him in either of them, you're kidding yourself, I think, a little bit. Although he ended up getting the job done, obviously, both times, and especially over Chisora, which was very tricky because it was a lot of people actually thought Chisora, started really well. He was, it was a rough fight. It was one that I think Usyk needed at heavyweight. I think he'll have come out of the Chisora fight better for it. So it'll have prepared him more for. I'm not saying Joshua and obviously Chisora fight the same, because they don't. But that when Chisora was constantly on his chest and Usyk was moving about, constant pressure, big heavy boxer coming forward, high guard, and just trying to throw bombs at Usyk. I think that did help him a lot, and will have helped him for the future. So I think you do. I think you do have to put weight into the heavyweight fights, definitely. But at the same time, he hasn't blown us away with his 2 heavyweight performances so far.
Yeah, and for me, that the Chaz Witherspoon, that's his first fight in heavyweight boxing. Like, he got the win. It wasn't overly impressive. That fight against Chisora started really well, but I think he was kind of like the perfect opponent at that stage, where it's an age in Chisora, but he has the heavyweight presence, if you know what I mean. That weight which Usyk wouldn't have felt before, the power that Usyk wouldn't have felt before. So I think it was a really good fight where he kind of shows what the heavyweight kind of scene is without having kind of the talent of those like upper echelon guys. But for me, I would have, and I was saying this to you earlier, I'd have quite liked to see Usyk in one more fight, especially seeing as he's only had 2 in however many years at heavyweight. I would have liked to have seen him in maybe one more top 10, top 15 kind of range, just to kind of show that he is really ready. Because the heavyweight game's completely different, even to the cruiserweight level, and some of the names in the heavyweight divisions, especially at the moment, it is quite a stacked division, especially seeing as where it has been in the past. So for me, I would have quite liked to have seen, just to see what Usyk's about, and I think it would have been a scarier fight for Joshua if he'd have had one more fight and experienced fighting at heavyweight against a good guy one more time.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely.
Yeah, but obviously Eddie Hearn picked Usyk, and he was a mandatory. So if you're Usyk and you probably don't want a risky fight in between fighting, if you have got yourself into that IBF mandatory spot, why would you take a tricky fight to prove yourself when you don't even need to? So I suppose that's the other argument to that. So now talking about the actual result of the main event, I'm going to put you on the spot here. I know you've said already on the channel what you think is going to happen. What is your prediction for Saturday night?
I'm definitely seeing a Joshua win. I can't see Usyk beating him, to be honest with you. I just don't know whether I've got my Anthony Joshua rose tinted glasses on, but no, genuinely, I can't see Joshua losing this fight. I like what I'm hearing from him, like in interviews and what I'm seeing on social media and the clips. And I know, like they show us what they want to show us. We see what we're fed essentially. But at the same time, I like his demeanor at the minute, and I'm confident he's going to get the win. And I've said before, I think the safe bet is probably on points. But don't be surprised if Joshua stops him. Don't be surprised at all.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I actually think I've been thinking about this, and I actually think we'll see a similar fight to the Parker fight, where I don't think it will be a classic. I think it could be a classic, but I don't think it will be. I think it will be kind of like a stop-starty. I don't know if the styles really match up well to make it kind of like a all-out brawl or whatever. Maybe Usyk will surprise me, but I think he will try and frustrate Joshua a bit more. And yeah, I agree. I think we'll see quite a wide unanimous decision victory for Anthony Joshua. But like you, I'm a huge anti-Joshua fan. So again, maybe it is the we're both wearing the same wrist in the glasses. I don't know. But yeah, I think Usyk has a chance of winning. I think Andy Ruiz obviously proved that anyone has a chance against Anthony Joshua, and he does leave himself a bit open sometimes. But I just don't think Usyk will outbox AJ. I don't think he has the power to hurt him in the way that Andy Ruiz did in that first fight. So now, obviously, that was our talk on the main event. We will run you through the whole undercard of this fight. Firstly, I just want to preface the undercard. It obviously has got a lot of stick, especially on social media. But I don't know. I don't know if it's actually that bad, or we just expect more from Matchroom and Sky and DAZN. Because if you look at especially in America, some of the other undercards that we've had on big fight nights, it's literally people you've never even heard of, up to maybe the co-main. And I think we've got a bit used to in the UK, especially getting these stacked undercards with 3 world title fights, and now it's kind of like the expected plan and the expected like what we've come to expect on every single Eddie Hearn undercard. But I don't think there's another promoter in world boxing that puts on as good undercards as Eddie Hearn and Matchroom. I think you've just got to look at Top Ranks undercards and some of the undercards over in America, when I know we're staying up till 5 a.m. and you're sitting there through this undercard with people who maybe you don't even know. So there are some that, again, it isn't the best undercard, and it's probably one of the worst undercards that they've put on in a while, but I don't think it's quite as bad as people suggest.
Yeah, I don't think it's considering it's about £25 for us to buy in the UK.
Yeah,
I'd say it's an average. I'd say it's an average pay-per-view undercard. I like you. I don't think it deserves the amount of stick that it has been given. Because there are a few nice fights on there, and although it might not be, world title or even European title, but it's good operators. Like, it's Callum Smith before the Canelo defeat. Everyone loved watching Callum Smith, and it's his first fight at light heavyweight. Yeah, I don't mind watching that on my undercard. The Marku Prodon fight. It interests me. Coley, I wasn't so keen on until his last performance when he looked really good. So yeah, I'm like, yeah, I don't mind tuning in to watch Lawrence Coley again. So yeah, I do agree. I think it's name-wise, it's probably quite average. Like, maybe, obviously it all depends on when people have previously fought, but if you had had another, like, let's say you had Joe Cordina and
he was the name that came to my mind. Yeah, he was the one that came to my mind.
Like, say he got a first world title challenge, throw him on if he was on the card, or Conor Benn and another step up, people like that. I think that would make it even more appealing, the undercard. But yeah, I don't think it deserves the amount of stick it has been given. But on the same token, we've seen better.
Yeah, I think you are paying for the names on this undercard. They've kind of just stuck a Coley, Callum Smith, Florian Marku, guys who are reasonably big names in UK boxing, and kind of put them in okay matchups, but not really the typical like 50-50, 60-40 kind of fights. And we were talking about the odds in our betting show, and they kind of do reflect that these guys who are the bigger names are the big favourites on that card. So we will start with the co-main event. Lawrence Coley, again, defending his world title, obviously against Dylan Presovic. How much are you looking forward to this fight?
I think it's I let it be. It's his first defense. I think it'll be a routine victory for Coley. I think it should be a routine victory, although the guy's undefeated, 15-0, and on paper looks very even. Against what opposition? Could always come back to that. You see these people with really padded records. So I hope he proves a good test for Coley, because we want to learn more about Coley as his career goes on now, especially he's at world level as well, because he can't afford to make as many mistakes. And he's still a work in progress. He's still learning on the job. So although it's not a great fight, and I expect Coley to finish it within 6 rounds, to be honest. But yeah, I don't mind it for his first defense, I suppose, of his WBO title.
Yeah, for me, especially in the co-main slot, Lawrence Okoli has a really good opportunity to kind of start to get rid of that boring title that he's kind of been given over the last few years. And I think this is kind of the perfect place and the perfect event for him to kind of show that he can be exciting and can not just win on points, basically. And I think he will try and get Presovic out there as quickly as possible. And I know he's spoken in the build-up about getting him out in 3 rounds. And I know Presovic is the mandatory for his WBO title, but you look at his record, he hasn't really beaten anyone of note. I think he hasn't beaten anyone. He's not beaten many people, even with a positive record, maybe 4 or 5. If what BoxRec, I was right on what I read on BoxRec. So again, it leaves a bit to be desired, but I do think it's more of an opportunity for Lawrence Okoli on a big stage than it is an exciting fight, if that makes sense. So then obviously the fight, which I am actually probably the second most excited for on the undercard, Callum Smith's first fight at light heavyweight, as you mentioned. He takes on Castillo. Obviously, Callum Smith in his last fight had that, again, it is against Canelo Alvarez, but it wasn't the greatest performance. And I think that is where a lot of the uninterest in this fight kind of comes from, where they just look at that. You're only as good as your last fight, really. And people will look at that Canelo fight and probably not be as interested in this. But for me, it's quite an intriguing fight. Castillo isn't a nobody. He's fought. He obviously, his only losses came to Marcus Brown and Bivol, and he has fought for the light heavyweight world title, which shows he does have that pedigree and that prestige in that division. Do you like this matchmaking for Callum Smith's first fight at light heavyweight?
Yeah, for his first light heavyweight fight, I do like it. I think it's actually a good matchup and good matchmaking here because, as you mentioned there, Castillo's only 2 defeats are against high level opposition. And I know he got beat by Marcus Brown, but he did drop him in that fight. So he's clearly, I think he definitely carries a punch because he's 21 wins and 16 of them he's won by stoppage. So he can clearly whack, and you never know. Smith moving up to an extra weight division, an extra half a stone or whatever it is. That's how will he take a punch from a bigger guy? I know Smith was always a big super middleweight.
Yeah.
But I'm just interested to see how he takes to the weight. I think he'll take to like a duck to water. I do think he'll be fine. I do expect him to win. And we might even see a better Callum Smith because, at the end of his super middleweight reign, everyone it was quite obvious that he was struggling. I know he would never admit it himself, being like, "Oh, I'm struggling to make the weight," but it was quite obvious, I think. Mm-hmm. To boxing fans that he couldn't be fighting at 168 for much longer just because of the sheer size of him. But yeah, I don't mind it as a fight at all. I think it's a good first test for stepping up to a new weight division, and one that, although I think he'll win, is definitely will be a decent name on his record.
Yeah, and I think you've mentioned it there. One of the more intriguing things in the build-up to this fight, we'll be seeing how Callum Smith looks on Friday at the weigh-in. I think I said it before. He hasn't looked great at super middleweight for a while, and he has looked quite depleted. And I think just looking at his frame, he is a light heavyweight, and the fact he could even make super middleweight and middleweight is kind of like a bit mad. But so I think it will be interesting to see how he has obviously there's been quite a while since his Canelo loss, so it'd be interesting to see how he has kind of approached making this weight and kind of seeing just how he looks and how his power holds up at this division. Maybe we'll see a different kind of Callum Smith in this fight. And I think that is why this fight is quite intriguing against a guy who is a typical light heavyweight, who isn't a guy. My biggest worry about Callum Smith's first fight at light heavyweight would be kind of them putting them up against a smaller light heavyweight to kind of ease him into the division, someone who maybe has also fought between the two. But Castillo is a world-renowned light heavyweight. So I think this is, again, a really good fight for Callum Smith. So then we move on to this is my favorite fight of the undercard. Florian Marku against Maxine Prodon. Are you as excited for this fight as I am?
Yeah, I really am. I know in our betting show, outside of the main event I was talking about, I said that if there was going to be potentially an upset, I can maybe see it coming in this fight. Prodon's got a better record than Marku, and although Marku's more exposed to us, on the UK TV, and he's a thoroughly entertaining fighter, I think. Yes, it's a good fight. It's a great fight. They're both, well, one's 19-0 and one's 8-0, and they both have a draw on their record, so undefeated. Southpaw v Orthodox, so sometimes that works against it, obviously, but sometimes it could gel. That'll be interesting to see as well how each cope with the opposite stance. And yeah, I think it's an interesting welterweight clash for me.
Yeah, and obviously Marku's coming off the win against Ryan Charlton in a good fight. I think it was towards the back end of last year. For me, Florian Marku might be the most interesting fighter on this card, and apart from the main event. We're talking completely outside of the main event. I think he's very entertaining. I think he is very entertaining in the build-up, and I think his fight style matches what words he puts out before in press conferences and online and on social media. I think he's done brilliantly well at marketing himself as well, into getting himself into a position where he is a pretty big name on this Anthony Joshua undercard. Again, he's in the biggest fight of his career. I think I'm quite intrigued to see how he deals with the problems that Prodon can face. And I think Marku will win. I think he will get the knockout. But again, it's quite an interesting fight. And I think Marku hasn't looked perfect in since he kind of moved to Matchroom. He hasn't really looked kind of like the world beater kind of guy he looked before. But I do think he has talent, and I think he is a thoroughly entertaining fighter. And he's one of the guys where I look towards his fights and go, actually, I will tune in for that and I will watch that, because you are going to see whether it's because he's not putting up a performance and he lets people in, or it's because he completely blows someone away. You do know it probably won't be a boring fight.
Agreed.
And then the final fight that we're going to talk about, Campbell Hatton, once again. I don't want to say it's because of his surname, but it's because of his surname that he's on this card. He takes on Izan Odura. Again, he's a 1-50 underdog. It's a learning process for Campbell Hatton, and I am slightly interested in how he does. And I think the more interesting part of Campbell Hatton's journey is kind of watching him get better. I think that's why they are doing this and putting him on big cards, because they kind of want the fan to kind of follow his journey from pretty much an inexperienced turning pro at that inexperienced level, and we can kind of follow him. And I'm sure they hope he'll be a European, even world title level in the future. Are you interested in this fight at all?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of, he's only 20. There's no rush with the kid. It's just a matter of, although the fight itself isn't interesting, it's just a matter of, exposing Campbell Hatton to the mainstream audience. It's a big platform. Obviously, a Joshua fight, there'll be millions of people watching. So I think that's not a bad thing. He's obviously learning on the job as well. But just take the time with him. He's very, very young. He's very raw. You can see that. Keep putting him in these 4 and 6 rounders. I'm fine with that for the meantime. He'll step up when he needs to. And he'll only get better. Although I'm not, sitting down, I can't say that I'll be, oh yes, I need to get that booked in time to watch the Campbell Hatton fight. I would maybe catch up on it or whatever the day after, or watch the highlights. But I hope he just gets more rounds, gains more experience, and yeah, I'm sure he'll have a long and fruitful career ahead of him.
Yeah, and I've just got a question for you on Campbell Hatton. Obviously, we've seen so far in his pro fights, he has kind of been marketed and tailored, like the way he walks to the ring, his fight kit towards his dad and towards Ricky Hatton. Do you think kind of like so closely aligning himself with Ricky and his dad kind of hurts his appeal and hurts himself, or do you actually think it helps?
Well, I think it was I think it's always really going to happen, to be honest with you. Like, even if you look at Eubank Jr., the way jumped over the ropes as well, just like his dad. Like, they're always going to people to just do things similarly. Like, even Conor Benn, I know his dad was the Dark Destroyer. He's the Destroyer. Like, even their nicknames essentially the same. I think there's always going to be a similarity, and I don't care. Right? I know we say we can't always compare them to their dads because of like how good they all were. But it happens anyway. We
Yeah.
will. It's
Just by having that surname, you
just
automatically
human nature. So I wouldn't say that it's well, it maybe at the start of his career when he's young, yeah, it might hurt him a little bit. But as he grows and gets older, it'll only be a good thing. He'll sell more tickets, won't he? He's like, oh yeah, he's related to Ricky Hatton. He's bound to be if he's half as entertaining as Ricky Hatton was, I'll tune in and watch him. So yeah, best of luck to the kid.
Yeah, I'd like to see a little bit more of like individuality. I think just a tiny bit where you aren't wearing the Man City shorts and coming out to the same kind of songs and stuff, and just like, kind of have your own personality around it. But I do get the marketing aspect of you will probably do better and will be on like these kind of cards if you do kind of closely align yourself when your dad is a great of UK boxing. So I do understand at the same time, but I don't know if I was Campbell Hatton, I don't know if I'd want to be trying to forge my own way in kind of the same way. Like I know he's not boxing, but Eddie Hearn's kind of done where he was Barry Hearn's son for years, and he's kind of like pushed himself so far now where he isn't as associated with his dad. Obviously, he'll always will be associated with his dad, but people you kind of respect people on their own merits after a certain point. And I think Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn, which you mentioned there, they've kind of got to the point now where they've kind of established themselves at the top level of boxing where they kind of are respected for their own abilities and their own personalities. And I think we will get to that point with Campbell Hatton. And maybe at the start of his career, they will use that name and that branding from his dad that just to get him seen and get him known, and then slowly kind of taper off from that the further he gets into his career. But obviously that's all up to him and how much talent he does. And obviously we do. I hope he does well. And he just seemed like a good kid. And yeah, so again, looking forward to seeing how he develops in the future. So there we go. That is the Anthony Joshua Oleksandr Usyk full card preview for the boxing week ahead for esbrboxing.com. Thank you once again, Paul. Enjoy the fights on Saturday night, as I'm sure everyone will. Hopefully it's a better card than people predict. So yeah, I'm going to be there. So I definitely hope it's going to be a better card than people predict. I don't want to rub it into you. As I'm just saying.
Well, you already are. Too late.
Yeah, I know. Oh, so yeah, thank you guys for watching. Please do like and subscribe. Check out all the other. We've got a load of AJ Usyk content going on the channel. Greg's prediction video. Paul and some of the other guys did another video breaking down the card again. So do check those out. And thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe once again. And we'll see you later.